I've been a park ranger at Willow Fork State Recreation Area for 11 years. It's not a wilderness post. I want to be clear about that up front. Willow Fork is a 1,300-acre park 40 minutes from Columbus, Ohio. On summer weekends we get 7,000 visitors. Families with coolers and inflatable rafts. Birthday parties at the shelters. High school cross-country teams doing training runs on the paved loop. There's a snack bar by the lake that sells soft serve and chicken tenders. The parking lot has 240 spaces, and on July 4th we have to station someone at the entrance to turn people away. I'm telling you this because when people hear park ranger and search and rescue, they picture a man alone in the backcountry. Snow-covered mountains, wolves, a missing hiker 3 days out from the nearest road. That's not this. What happened at Willow Fork happened in broad daylight, with hundreds of people less than a quarter-mile away, within earshot of a DJ playing cumbia at Shelter C. The scariest part isn't that it happened in the wilderness. The scariest part is that it happened somewhere you'd take your kids on a Tuesday. I need to give you some geography. The park is shaped roughly like a boot, a wide, flat southern section with the lake, the shelters, the playground, and the parking areas, then a narrow northern corridor that runs alongside Willow Creek up into a ravine system. The ravine trails are moderately popular. They're marked, maintained, and none of them exceed 2 miles. You can stand at the trailhead kiosk and see the last shelter through the trees behind you. That's how close we're talking. The ravine system has 3 trails, the Creek Walk, the Ridge Loop, and the Fern Trail. They intersect at a junction we call the bench, because there's a bench there, a memorial bench for a woman named Dorothy Kessler who donated money to the park in the 90s. From the bench, you can see the creek below through the trees. You can hear the parking lot behind you if someone honks. It's maybe 8 minutes of walking from the nearest restroom. This happened on September 14th, a Saturday. I was working the day shift with 3 other rangers, Martinez, Colleen, and a seasonal named Tyler who was in his 2nd summer with us. The weather was clear and mid-70s. We had moderate traffic, maybe 2,000 visitors by midday. Normal, unremarkable late-season Saturday. At 1:47 p.m., a woman came to the ranger station and reported that her son had not returned from a hike on the Fern Trail. His name was Caleb Bren, age 9. He'd gone up with his 12-year-old sister, Margot, and their dog about 45 minutes earlier. Margot had come back alone about 10 minutes before the mother arrived at our station. She said Caleb had stopped to look at something off-trail and she'd kept walking, assuming he'd catch up. The dog was with Margot when she returned. This is not an unusual report. Kids separate from siblings on trails. They get distracted, take a wrong turn, sit down to rest. 95% of the time we find them within 15 minutes, often walking back on their own, sometimes crying, occasionally completely unbothered and confused about why everyone was upset. I took the report and radioed Martinez. He was already near the trailhead doing a routine pass. I told him what we had and asked him to start up the Fern Trail from the south. I headed up from the bench junction. Colleen stayed at the station with the mother. The Fern Trail is 1.3 miles. It's a gentle slope through second-growth hardwoods, well marked with white blazes, wide enough for 2 people to walk abreast. There are no cliff edges, no water crossings deeper than ankle height, no areas where a child could become physically trapped without extraordinary effort. I've walked it probably 400 times. I reached the bench at 1:58 p.m. and started north on the Fern Trail. Martinez radioed that he was coming up from the trailhead. We'd meet somewhere in the middle with Caleb between us. If you're listening to this late at night, the kind of person who finds these stories and lets them run while the house gets quiet around you, you can subscribe to this channel. I think you'll understand why I still need to talk about this, even now. I walked the full length of my section in 12 minutes. Martinez walked his in about the same. We met near a footbridge over a seasonal drainage at roughly the trail's midpoint. No Caleb. This is where it stops being a routine report. The Fern Trail is linear with a single short spur that dead ends at a rock outcrop overlook. There is nowhere else to go. A child walking at any pace would have been visible to one of us approaching from either direction. The trail has no dense understory in September, the ferns are dying back, the visibility through the trees is 30, 40 yards in most places. Martinez and I checked the spur trail. We checked the drainage itself, which was dry. We called Caleb's name every 30 seconds. We heard nothing except the ambient park noise, distant music, a lawnmower, someone's car alarm going off briefly in the lot. At 2:14 p.m. I radioed Colleen and asked her to confirm with the mother, was she certain Caleb went up the Fern Trail and not the Creek Walk or Ridge Loop? Colleen confirmed. Both Margot and the mother were certain. Margot said she'd walked the entire Fern Trail with him before they separated. She put the separation point at past the bridge, which would place it in the upper third of the trail, exactly the section I'd just walked. We expanded. Tyler came up to cover the Creek Walk. Martinez took the Ridge Loop. I walked the Fern Trail a second time, slower, checking both sides of the trail for any indication a child had gone off path. Broken branches, footprints in the leaf litter, disturbed ground. Nothing. At 2:31 p.m. I was back at the bench junction. I sat down on Dorothy Kessler's memorial bench and tried to think clearly. A 9-year-old boy, in a park with 2,000 other people present, on a marked trail less than a quarter mile from a parking lot, had been unreachable for 44 minutes. He was wearing a red t-shirt, the mother had specified that. Red, with some kind of dinosaur graphic. In a forest that was, at this time of year, predominantly green and brown. He should have been visible from a significant distance. I radioed for a full search protocol. County Sheriff's Office was notified at 2:38 p.m. 2 deputies arrived by 3 o'clock. A volunteer search team from the county's SAR auxiliary was activated by 3:15. By 4 p.m. we had 22 people in the ravine system, walking grid patterns through the woods on both sides of all 3 trails. The grid covered every square foot within 200 yards of the Fern Trail in both directions. This encompassed the creek bed, the ridge above, 2 old drainage culverts from a road that was decommissioned in the 1970s, and a stretch of property boundary fence where our park meets private agricultural land. The fence is 4-strand barbed wire, intact, with no gaps large enough for a child to pass through without leaving evidence on the wire. No Caleb. By 5:30 p.m. we had a K-9 unit. The dog, a bloodhound named Rosie, was given a scent article from Caleb's backpack, which Margot had been carrying. Rosie worked the Fern Trail from the trailhead to approximately the same area where Margot said she'd last seen her brother. At that point, Rosie stopped. I need to describe what stopped means. Rosie didn't lose the scent and start casting around. She didn't indicate confusion or a dead end. Her handler, a deputy named Womack, told me later that what Rosie did was unusual enough that he made a specific note of it in his report. Rosie reached a point on the trail, roughly 60 yards past the footbridge, sat down, and refused to continue. Not straining against the lead, not whining, not indicating in any direction. She sat down the way a dog sits when you tell it to stay. Then she looked at Womack and wagged her tail once. He tried to restart her twice. Both times she walked forward a few steps, returned to the same spot, and sat again. Womack said, in 11 years of working with trailing dogs, he'd never seen that behavior. It wasn't a failure to track. It was, in his words, like she was telling me we were already there. We searched until dark. We searched the next day with 46 people, including a dive team that checked the lake, which is a quarter-mile from the Fern Trail and would have required Caleb to walk back down through the entire populated section of the park, past hundreds of people, without being seen. The dive team found nothing. Thermal imaging drones covered the ravine system. Nothing. Caleb Bren was never found. I need to sit with that sentence for a moment because I've said it probably 100 times and it still doesn't feel real. He was never found. Not a shoe, not a thread from his shirt, not a bone, not a trace. Not in the park, not in the surrounding area, not anywhere. As of today, his case remains open and unresolved with the county sheriff's office. I'm going to tell you what I haven't told anyone outside of the 2 people who were there with me. Because what I just described, a missing child who was never found, is horrible, but it's not what makes this my scariest story. Kids disappear. It's a statistical reality. It's devastating, but it's within the bounds of what the world does. What I'm about to describe is not. For days after Caleb's disappearance, on Wednesday, September 18th, I was walking the Fern Trail as part of ongoing search activity. We were still checking daily, still maintaining a presence in case he'd somehow gotten lost and was surviving in the woods, though by that point everyone with experience knew that a 9-year-old without supplies, in an area that had been exhaustively searched with dogs and thermal imaging, was not going to walk out of the trees. It was about 11 a.m. Overcast, cool for September. The park was nearly empty, midweek after the weekend of the disappearance, with a lot of locals staying away because of the news coverage. I was walking north on the Fern Trail, past the footbridge, approaching the area where Rosie had stopped. And I heard a child laughing. Not distant. Not ahead of me or behind me. The sound was beside me, to my left, maybe 10 yards into the trees. A child's laugh, brief, 3 or 4 syllables. The way a kid laughs when someone tickles them or when they see something funny. Bright and untroubled. I stopped walking. I turned toward the sound. The woods were open, I could see clearly through the trees for at least 50 yards. There was nothing there. No child, no person, no movement. I stood still for maybe 20 seconds. Then I heard it again. Same distance. Same direction. Same laugh. I left the trail. I walked directly toward where the sound had come from. Dead leaves under my boots. No undergrowth to hide anything larger than a rabbit. I walked 10 yards, 20, 30. Nothing. I stood still and waited. 11:07 a.m. The laugh came again. Behind me now. Back toward the trail. Same distance, 10 yards. Same bright, unbothered sound. 3 or 4 syllables. I turned around. The trail was visible through the trees. Nothing on it. Nothing between me and it. I walked back to the trail. I stood on it and waited. My radio was in my hand. I almost keyed it. I didn't, and I don't entirely know why. Some part of me understood, not rationally, not through evidence, but with a certainty that felt physical, that this was not something I should share on an open channel. The laugh did not come again. I filed no report. I told no one that day. I walked the rest of the trail, completed my check, returned to the station, and drove home at the end of my shift. That night I sat in my kitchen and drank 2 beers and tried to convince myself I'd heard a bird. There are birds that can sound like laughter. Pileated woodpeckers have a call that some people describe as laughing. We have them in the park. I told myself that's what it was. 3 days later, September 21st, Saturday. The park was moderately busy again. People's attention spans for local tragedies are short, and the weather was good. I was on the ridge loop around 2 p.m., doing a pass. There were other hikers on the trail. A couple in their 30s with trekking poles, an older man with a golden retriever. I was descending toward the creek crossing, a spot where the ridge loop drops down and briefly parallels the creek before climbing back up, when I saw a red shirt through the trees. Red. Below me, near the water. Moving. My heart did something it had never done before. It didn't speed up. It felt like it stopped and restarted with a different rhythm. I left the trail immediately, going downhill toward the creek. The shirt was there, red, moving through the trees at the pace of a walking child. I couldn't see the person wearing it clearly. Just the shirt, glimpses of it between trunks and branches. I called out. Hey! Hey, stop! The red shape continued moving. Not faster, not slower. Not responding. I was half running downhill, grabbing at trees to control my descent. The slope is steep there, 35 degrees. I reached the creek bed, which is rocky and about 10 feet wide at that point, and looked in the direction the shirt had been moving. Nothing. The creek was empty. Both banks were visible for 60 or 70 yards in either direction. The woods on the far side were open. No red shirt. No child. No person. I stood in the creek with water running over my boots and felt something I can only describe as a temperature change inside my body. Not cold from the water. Cold from inside, like my organs had been briefly refrigerated. 2:09 p.m. I looked down at the rocks in the creek bed. There were no wet footprints on any of the dry rocks that would indicate someone had just crossed. The sandy patches between the rocks showed no impressions other than mine. I climbed back up to the ridge loop. The couple with trekking poles was still there, stopped to take photos of the creek below. I asked them, keeping my voice even, professional, if they'd seen a child in a red shirt in the last few minutes. They said no. They'd been standing there for several minutes watching the water. They hadn't seen anyone below. I know what you're going to think. Grief, stress, pattern recognition gone wrong. A cardinal flashing through the trees, my mind filling in the rest because I needed, the story to have an ending. I thought that too. I thought it for about a week. Then it became impossible to keep thinking it. September 28th. 1 week later. I was off duty, at my apartment, 23 miles from the park. I was watching television, something I don't even remember. It was around 8 p.m. My phone rang. Unknown number, local area code. I answered. Silence on the line. Not dead air, I could hear ambient sound. Wind, or maybe traffic. Something open and moving. Hello. I said. Nothing. 10 seconds. 15. Then a child laughed. The same laugh. 3 or 4 syllables. Bright, unbothered, close to the mouthpiece. The call ended. I sat there with the phone in my hand for a very long time. I checked the call log. The number was there. I called it back. The line rang once and went to a tone, not a voicemail tone, not a disconnected number message. Just a single flat tone that continued until I hung up. I called it again the next morning. Same thing. I asked a friend who works for the county to run the number. He told me 2 days later that it wasn't assigned. It wasn't a spoofed number or a VoIP line, it simply didn't exist in any carrier's system. But it was in my call log. Time-stamped. 31 seconds long. October became November. The official search was scaled down, then suspended. The family held a vigil at the trailhead. I attended in my uniform, said nothing of substance, went home. I stopped walking the fern trail during my shifts. I told my supervisor I wanted to focus on the southern section of the park for a while. He didn't question it. But I couldn't stop thinking about the location where Rosie had sat down. 60 yards past the footbridge. That specific point on the trail. I thought about it the way you think about a word you can't remember. It was right there, right at the edge of something, and if I could just reach it. On November 3rd, my day off, I drove to the park. I didn't sign in, didn't tell anyone I was there. I parked in the overflow lot where there were no cameras and walked to the fern trail. The trees were bare by then. The woods were skeletal and gray. Visibility was extraordinary, you could see through the forest like looking through a chain-link fence. If there had been anything there, anything at all, I would have seen it from 100 yards. I walked to the spot. I knew exactly where it was because I'd been there when Womack worked Rosie, and I remembered the specific tree, a shagbark hickory with a double trunk that forked at chest height. I stood at the spot. The forest was silent. Not quiet, silent. No birds, no squirrels, no wind in the remaining leaves. The temperature was in the low 40s, but I was sweating. I could feel perspiration running down my spine. I stood there for 10 minutes. Nothing happened. I was about to leave, had actually turned to walk back south toward the bridge, when I looked down at the trail surface. The fern trail is packed earth and fine gravel. In November, with the leaf litter cleared by rain, the surface is smooth and shows impressions clearly. There were footprints on the trail that had not been there when I walked in. Small footprints. Child-sized. Bare feet. They were behind me. Between me and the direction I'd come from. As if someone had been following me and stopped when I stopped. I stared at them. There were 4 clear prints, 2 left, 2 right, alternating. Walking pace. The toes were clearly defined. They were fresh, the edges were crisp, not softened by moisture or wind. I looked up. The trail behind me was empty. Of course it was. But here is what I cannot explain and cannot stop thinking about. The footprints were facing the wrong direction. They were behind me, between me and the way I'd come in. If someone had been following me, the toes would point north, the direction I'd been walking. Toward me. The toes pointed south. Toward the trailhead. Toward the parking lot. Whatever made those prints was behind me and walking away from me. Walking out. But there was nothing on the trail between me and the direction those feet were heading. I could see the footbridge from where I stood. I could see the bench junction beyond it. The trail was empty. The prints were walking toward an exit they had apparently already passed through. I left. I walked back to my car at a pace that was not quite running. I checked behind me every few seconds. The trail remained empty. When I passed over the spot where the prints had been, I had to, it was the only way out, they were gone. The trail surface was smooth and unmarked. 3 days later, November 6th, I received a letter in my home mailbox. No return address. Local postmark. Inside was a single sheet of white paper, folded twice. On it, in pencil, was a drawing. A child's drawing. Crayon and pencil. It showed 3 figures. 2 tall ones and 1 small one between them. The tall figures had triangle bodies and stick arms. The small one was round, with a large circle head and a smile drawn as a single curved line. Above the figures, in a child's printing, large, uneven, earnest, we found him. I took the letter to the sheriff's office the next day. They logged it as evidence in the Bren case. They fingerprinted it. The only prints were mine. They tested the paper, standard copy paper available at any store. The crayon was Crayola, standard colors. The pencil was a number 2. No DNA other than mine and trace amounts consistent with postal handling. They interviewed the Bren family. Margot and Mrs. Bren both said the drawing did not resemble Caleb's artistic style, and he didn't draw triangles for bodies, he drew rectangles. Mr. Bren said nothing during the interview. He stared at the drawing on the table and didn't speak. I want to tell you what Mr. Bren did, 6 weeks later. I want to tell you because it matters, because it's part of this, because I've never been able to say it out loud without my voice changing. On December 19th, Mr. Bren drove to Willow Fork. He parked in the main lot, cameras confirmed this, 6:14 a.m., before the park opened. He walked to the Fern Trail. He walked north past the footbridge to the area where his son was last known to be. And then he walked off the trail, into the woods on the left side, the same side where I'd heard the laughter, and he was not seen again. His car was found at 8:30 a.m. when the morning crew arrived. Search teams were deployed by 9 o'clock. The entire ravine system was gridded again, with more people, more dogs, more technology than we'd had in September. State police, FBI consultants, cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar on the flat sections. Nothing. Not a footprint, not a fiber. The cameras at the lot entrance showed him arriving. No camera or person saw him on the trail. It was as if he had driven to the park and evaporated between his car and the trailhead. Except, and this is in the official report, his car was locked, and his keys were found on the Fern Trail at the exact spot where Rosie had sat down in September. Placed neatly on the edge of the trail. Not dropped. Placed. As if he'd set them down carefully, the way you set your keys on a table when you come home. When you come home. I've thought about that every day for more than a decade now. Martinez transferred to a state park in West Virginia 3 months later. He told me, the day he left, that he'd had dreams about the Fern Trail every night since September, and in every dream he was walking north on the trail and could hear footsteps behind him walking south. He said in the dreams he knew that if he turned around he would see who it was, and that was why he never turned around. I didn't transfer. I'm still at Willow Fork. I still work the day shift. I still walk the trails in the southern section. I have not walked the Fern Trail since November 3rd. But I need to tell you what happened last month, because it's the reason I'm talking about this now, and it's the reason I don't sleep well anymore, and it's the reason I'm sitting here in my kitchen at 2 a.m. recording this instead of lying in bed listening to my apartment settle. Last month, April, early spring, a seasonal ranger named Dana was doing trail maintenance on the Fern Trail. Clearing winter debris, checking blazes, the standard opening prep we do every year. I wasn't there. I was in the south section. I have an understanding with my supervisor that I don't get assigned to the ravine trails. He doesn't know why. He doesn't ask. Dana came back to the station at the end of her shift and asked me a question. She asked it casually, the way you'd ask about a policy or a piece of equipment. She said, "Hey, is there a geocache or something at that double trunk hickory on the Fern Trail? Past the bridge?" I asked her why. She said she'd found something sitting on the exposed root at the base of the tree. A small object. She picked it up and looked at it and then put it back because she assumed it was part of a memorial or a geocache and didn't want to disturb it. I asked her what it was. She said it was a toy dinosaur. Small, green, plastic. The kind you get in a bag of 50 from a dollar store. I asked her if there was anything else. She said no. Just the dinosaur, sitting upright on the root, facing the trail. Like someone had placed it there carefully. Red t-shirt with a dinosaur graphic. I went back. The next morning, before the park opened, I went back. First time on the Fern Trail in over a decade. The hickory was the same. The exposed root was the same. The spot where Rosie sat, where the keys were placed, where the footprints appeared and vanished, the same. There was no toy dinosaur on the root. The root was bare, just bark and dried leaves. I checked the ground around it, checked under the leaf litter, checked 10 yards in every direction. But there was something else. On the trail surface, in the thin layer of spring mud that coats the packed earth after snowmelt, footprints. Child-sized. Bare. 2 sets this time. One small. One smaller. Both walking south. Toward the trailhead. Toward the parking lot. Toward out. And between them, between the 2 sets of child-sized bare footprints, adult prints. Larger. Booted. The tread pattern was distinctive. I recognized it immediately because it's a common brand among people who work outdoors in this part of Ohio. They were Danner boots. Size 11. The same brand and size that Michael Bren wore. That his wife confirmed when she identified his clothing for the missing person report. 3 sets of prints. Walking south. Walking out. Together. I looked up. The trail south was empty. The parking lot was visible through the bare spring trees. There was no one there. I stood on that trail for a long time. I don't know how long. Long enough that the morning light changed angle and the shadows shifted and the park began to wake up around me. Here is what I know. Caleb Bren disappeared on September 14th from this trail. His father disappeared on December 19th from this trail. Both of them vanished completely, leaving no trace, in a small, heavily trafficked public park in central Ohio. Here is what I believe, which is different from what I know: they are still there. Not in the ground. Not dead. Not in the park in any way I can describe with vocabulary that was designed for the physical world. They are in the Fern Trail the way a word is in a book, present, locatable, but not accessible by walking to the page and trying to pull it out. The trail is a sentence. They are somewhere inside it. And sometimes the sentence leaks. The laughter. The red shirt. The footprints going out, always walking south, always heading toward an exit they apparently reach without ever arriving at it. I think Michael Bren understood before I did. I think that's why he set his keys down neatly. I think he wasn't vanishing. I think he was going in. Deliberately. The way you walk into your house at the end of a long day. I think the drawing, "We found him," was not a taunt. I think it was an invitation. And I think the dinosaur on the route was placed there for Dana to find and tell me about. So I would come back. So I would stand in that spot again. I don't know what happens next. I know that I walked away. I know that when I got home that evening, I checked my call log and found a 31-second call from a number that doesn't exist, time-stamped during the time I'd been standing on the trail. I didn't hear it ring. I was there. My phone was in my pocket. It didn't ring. But something answered. The call log says outgoing. As if I made it. As if I stood there and called someone and spoke for 31 seconds and hung up. I have no memory of this. I don't walk the Fern Trail. I don't take the ravine assignments. I come to work, I do my job in the southern section, I go home. I check my call log every night before I sleep. So far, nothing else has appeared. But I've started dreaming about walking. Always north. Always past the bridge. Always toward that double-trunk hickory. And in the dream I can hear my own boots on the packed earth, and I can hear the sound of the creek, and I can hear the laughter, not ahead of me, not behind me, but below. As if the trail itself is a thin surface and the laughter is coming up through it like sound through a floor. And in the dream there are footprints appearing in front of me. Small ones. Walking south, toward me, getting closer even though I'm moving north and they're moving south. We're walking toward each other. In the dream, I always wake up before we meet. But every time I have it, the distance is shorter. I measured it the first time. In the dream, the print started at the far end of my vision, maybe 100 yards ahead. The last time I had the dream was 3 nights ago. The print started at about 15 feet. I don't know what happens when the distance is 0. I don't know if I'll have a choice about it. I don't know if the Fern Trail is taking people or if people are choosing the Fern Trail, and whether there's a difference. I just know that Michael Bren left his keys on the edge of the path the way you set them on the table when you come home. And I know that the footprints always face south. Always toward out. As if wherever they are, they believe they're leaving. They've been walking out for 11 years. They haven't arrived yet. I check my call log every night. I go to work in the morning. I stay in the south section. I don't walk the Fern Trail. But last night, when I woke up from the dream, I was standing in my kitchen. My boots were on. My car keys were in my hand. The front door was open. It was 3:47 a.m. and the air coming in was November cold even though it's May, and I could smell wet leaves and creek water and something else underneath, something clean and mineral, like the inside of a stone. I put the keys down. I closed the door. I went back to bed. But I put the keys down gently. I put them down the way you put them down when you come home. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat at the kitchen table with the lights on and my hands flat on the surface and I waited for morning the way you wait for a doctor to come back with results. Not impatiently. Just with the understanding that whatever comes next is already decided and you're just waiting to be told. At 5:30 a.m. I checked my boots. They were laced. Not loosely, not shoved on, laced correctly, the way I do it every morning, left over right, tucked and pulled. I don't lace my boots in my sleep. I've never sleepwalked. I asked my ex-wife once, years ago, whether I'd ever done anything strange at night. She said I barely moved. Said sleeping next to me was like sleeping next to a log. I checked my car. It was in the same spot in the apartment lot. The engine was cold. The seat position was correct. The odometer, I've been writing it down every night since November, 11 years of odometer readings in a small notebook I keep in the glove box, matched. Wherever I'd been going when I woke up, I hadn't made it to the car. That morning I called in sick for the first time in 3 years. I sat in my apartment all day. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't eat until 4 p.m. and then only because my hands were shaking and I recognized it as blood sugar. I ate a sleeve of crackers standing at the counter and stared at my front door and noticed, for the first time, that there were faint scratches on the inside of the deadbolt plate. Vertical scratches. The kind you'd make if you were unlocking a deadbolt in the dark by feel. I don't unlock my door in the dark. The switch for the hallway light is 6 inches from the lock. There's no reason to fumble. Unless you were doing it with your eyes closed. Unless you were doing it asleep. I installed a chain lock that afternoon. The sliding kind, high on the frame, the kind you can't undo without being deliberate about it, without reaching up and pulling the slide back consciously. I told myself this was reasonable home security. I did not tell myself the real reason, which is that I was trying to build a system my sleeping body couldn't operate. May 9th, 6 days after the night I woke up in the kitchen. I worked my shift, stayed in the south section, talked to visitors, checked fishing permits at the lake. Normal day. I drove home at 5:15 p.m. I made dinner, watched something on my laptop, went to bed at 10:30. I woke at 2:58 a.m. I was in bed this time. Not standing, not dressed, not at the door. I was in bed with the covers pulled up, comfortable, oriented correctly. I woke because my phone was making a sound. Not ringing. Not buzzing. The screen was illuminated on my nightstand and it was making the short tone it makes when a call connects, that single brief chirp you hear when you dial someone and the line picks up. I reached for it. The screen showed an active call. Outgoing. Duration, 0:47 and counting. The number displayed was the same one from September, from the first call, from the call that doesn't exist in any carrier system. I put the phone to my ear. I heard breathing. Not labored, not heavy. Quiet breathing, the kind you hear when someone is asleep. Regular, shallow, undisturbed. And behind it, beneath it, really, like a second layer, the sound of footsteps on packed earth. Steady pace. The rhythm of walking. I didn't speak. I listened for 22 seconds, I watched the counter on the screen, and then the call ended. Not disconnected, not dropped. Ended cleanly, the way it ends when someone presses the button. I looked at the duration. 1:09. I'd been on that call for over a minute before I woke up. Something, me, my hands, my sleeping body, had dialed that number and held the phone and been connected for 69 seconds. Or something had called me and my phone had logged it as outgoing. But I don't know which is worse. I checked the chain lock in the morning. Still engaged. Still latched. I hadn't left. Whatever was happening, it was happening inside my apartment, inside my sleep, inside the 47 seconds between the call connecting and my conscious mind surfacing to hear it. I started recording myself at night. An old digital voice recorder from a drawer, the kind I used to use for field notes before we switched to the app system. I set it on my nightstand, pressed record, and let it run until the memory filled. 8 hours of capacity. First night, nothing. 8 hours of my own breathing and the refrigerator cycling and a car passing outside at 3:14 a.m. Second night, nothing. Third night, May 12th. I reviewed the recording the next morning with headphones in, sitting at my kitchen table with coffee going cold beside me. For 6 hours and 11 minutes, nothing. My breathing. The apartment. At the 6 hours 11 minutes and 34 seconds mark, which corresponds to approximately 4:41 a.m., there is a sound that is not me and not the apartment. It's a voice. My voice. Speaking quietly, the way you speak when you're on the phone and trying not to wake someone. Barely above a whisper but clearly articulated. It says, I know. I know. I can hear you. Pause. 4 seconds. Then, not yet. I can't yet. Pause. 7 seconds. Then a sound that might be laughter or might be an exhale. Brief. Then nothing. My breathing returns to its sleeping rhythm. I played it back 9 times. It is my voice. It is clearly my voice. The cadence is mine, the vowels are mine, the slight rasp I get in the early morning is there. It is me, speaking to someone, while asleep, at 4:41 a.m. I know. I know. I can hear you. Hear what? Hear who? Not yet. I can't yet. Can't what? I called Martinez. I hadn't spoken to him in 4 years. He'd moved to West Virginia, then to Pennsylvania, further and further from Central Ohio, though he never said why and I never asked because I already knew. He answered on the second ring, and when I told him who it was, there was a silence that lasted long enough to be a sentence. I asked him if he still had the dreams. The walking dreams. He said no. He said they stopped after about 18 months. He said he put 2 states between himself and Willow Fork and the dreams stopped and he could sleep through the night again and he was fine. He said, I'm fine 3 times in a 2-minute conversation, and I believed him every time, and I also understood that fine meant, I left and I don't go back and I don't think about it, and that's how I'm fine. I asked him if anything else had happened after he left. Anything unusual. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, my daughter found a toy dinosaur in our mailbox about 2 years ago. Little green plastic one. I threw it away. I didn't say anything. I threw it away, he repeated, and the next week there was another one. On the porch. I threw that one away too. I've probably thrown away 15 of them. They just show up. Not every week, not on a schedule. Just every now and then. Usually after I dream about the trail. I asked, you said the dreams stopped. Another silence. The walking dreams stopped. I don't dream about the trail. I dream about, he stopped. Took a breath. I dream about a kitchen. My old kitchen from when I was a kid. And there are people in it but I can't see their faces. And one of them is small. And they're all happy. And I wake up feeling like I missed something. Like I was supposed to go somewhere and forgot. He asked me not to call again. He said it with no anger, no coldness. He said it the way you'd tell someone not to bring up a specific topic at dinner. A boundary, politely set. I respected it. May 14th. I went to the county records office on my lunch break and pulled the original incident reports for both Caleb and Michael Bren. I'd read them before, many times, but I was looking for something specific now. I found it in Deputy Womack's supplemental report from September 15, the day after Caleb's disappearance. During the initial grid search, Womack noted that one of the volunteer searchers, a man named Gerald Fife, who'd been with the county SAR auxiliary for 8 years, had experienced what Womack described as a brief disorientation event near the search area. The details: Fife was walking a grid line through the woods approximately 40 yards east of the Fern Trail, in the area between the trail and the creek. He was in visual contact with searchers on either side of him, standard grid spacing of about 15 yards. At approximately 4:20 p.m., the searchers on either side of Fife reported that he stopped moving. They called to him. He did not respond. They converged on his position and found him standing still, facing south, with his eyes open but unfocused. They described his expression as neutral, not afraid, not confused, not distressed. Just still. After approximately 90 seconds, Fife blinked, looked at the people around him, and said, "This is directly quoted in Womack's report, sorry. I thought I heard my name." He was checked by medical personnel on scene, showed no signs of stroke or seizure, and continued searching. He later told Womack he didn't remember stopping. He remembered walking, then he remembered people on either side of him looking concerned. The gap between was blank. I looked up Gerald Fife. He's still in the county. He's 71 now, retired from the auxiliary, lives about 12 miles from the park. I didn't call him. I drove to his house. He lives in a small ranch house on a half-acre lot outside of Westerville. White siding, chain-link fence, a truck in the driveway with a faded SAR volunteer sticker on the bumper. He answered the door in a flannel shirt and reading glasses and looked at me with a recognition that shouldn't have been possible. I've never met him, wasn't in uniform, and didn't identify myself before he said, "You're from the park?" Not a question. I said yes. He invited me in. His living room was clean, simple, a television on mute showing a home renovation program. He offered me coffee and I accepted, and he moved slowly in his kitchen and said nothing until he sat down across from me with 2 mugs. "It's about the Fern Trail," he said. I asked him what he remembered about September 15, 2015. About the grid search. About stopping. He looked at his coffee. Then he looked at me with an expression that I can only describe as relieved. "Nobody's ever asked me about that," he said. 11 years. I put it in my own notes that night. I told my wife. I wanted to tell Womack more, but he wrote it up as a disorientation, and I thought, maybe that's all it was. He told me what he remembered. He was walking his grid line. He could hear the other searchers, could see them in his peripheral vision. The woods were normal, open, gray-green, September light through the canopy. He was scanning the ground, looking for any sign of a child's passage. Then he heard his name. Not from the searchers beside him. Not from ahead or behind. From below. From under the ground, he said. Muffled, the way a voice sounds through a floor. Someone directly beneath him, saying his name. He stopped. He looked down. The ground was unremarkable, leaf litter, dirt, a few exposed roots. Then he heard it again. His name. And a child's voice, not the same voice that said his name, a different one, younger, said, "He's right there." And then he was back. The searchers were beside him, concerned. 90 seconds gone. I didn't pass out, he said. I didn't fall. I was just listening. I was listening to something under the ground and it was talking about me. Telling someone I was there. I asked him if anything had happened since. He put his coffee down. Got up. Went to a cabinet in the hallway and came back with a shoebox. Inside were dozens of sheets of paper, torn from notebooks, cut from larger pieces, folded, crumpled, smoothed. Each one had a drawing on it. Child's drawings. Crayon and pencil. Trees. Figures walking between trees. A trail. A bench. A bridge. Over and over, variations on the same scene. Some were crude, some more careful. All were clearly done by a child's hand. I find them, he said. In my mailbox. Under my doormat. Once inside my truck, which was locked. They just appear. Every few weeks. They've been coming for years. I looked through them. Near the bottom of the box, I found one that made me set it on my lap and stare at it for a long time. It showed 3 figures on a trail. 2 small, 1 large. The large one was behind the 2 small ones. All 3 were walking south. I could tell because there was a simple drawing of a bridge below them and what might have been a parking lot at the bottom of the page. The large figure had a hat on. A flat-brimmed hat. A ranger's hat. That one came last month, Fife said. That's why I wasn't surprised to see you. I figured you'd come eventually. I asked him what he thought it meant. He shook his head. I think they're sending postcards, he said. I think wherever they are, they think they're almost home. They've been thinking that for 11 years. And I think. He stopped. Looked at the window. The May afternoon light was warm and yellow on his lawn. I think they need someone to walk toward. I think that's how the trail works. It doesn't bring you in. It needs someone on the outside walking the same direction. Like a mirror. They walk south on their side, someone walks south on this side, and the 2 paths. He made a gesture with his hands. 2 flat palms coming together. Meet, he said. The 2 paths meet. I drove home. It was 4:30 p.m., full daylight, the roads busy with commuter traffic. Normal world, normal sounds. I parked in my lot, went upstairs, and sat at my kitchen table. My notebook, the one I keep in my glove box for odometer readings, was on the table. I had not brought it inside. I keep it in the glove box. Always. It lives there. It was open to the last page I'd written on. Below my most recent entry, May 14th, 67,441.2, there was a new line. Written in pencil, in my handwriting. My exact handwriting, the same slant, the same pressure, the same habit of not fully closing my 4s. It said, 67,441.2 plus 23 equals home. 23 miles. The distance from my apartment to Willow Fork State Recreation Area. I stared at it until the light from the window changed and my kitchen was dim and I realized I'd been sitting for over 2 hours without moving. That was 4 days ago. I'm recording this now, May 18th, 2 a.m., because something has changed and I need to say it out loud, to someone, to whatever version of an audience exists in the dark on the other end of this. Tonight, before bed, I checked the chain lock. Engaged. I checked the deadbolt. Locked. I placed my car keys in the freezer, inside a bag of frozen peas, which I would have to consciously retrieve and open. I put my boots in the trunk of my car, in the parking lot, 2 floors down. I set the voice recorder. I set a motion-activated camera pointed at my front door, a wildlife camera from work that I brought home. I did everything I could think of to make leaving impossible without fully waking. I went to bed at 11 p.m. I woke at 1:47 a.m. The exact time, to the minute, that Caleb Brenn's mother first reported him missing. I was in bed. The chain lock was engaged. The deadbolt was locked. I checked immediately. But my feet were dirty. Not dusty, dirty. The kind of dirt you pick up from packed earth. From a trail surface. I could feel it between my toes and on my heels. I went to the bathroom and looked. My feet were covered in fine-grained soil. Pale brown. The exact color and texture of the fern trail surface. The apartment is a second-floor unit with no ground-level access except the front door, which was locked and chained from inside. I washed my feet in the bathtub. The water ran brown. Small fragments of leaf matter came off my soles. I caught them in my hand before they went down the drain. Tiny pieces. Decomposed. November leaves, I thought. Not May leaves. The wrong season's leaves. I checked the camera. The footage showed my front door, undisturbed, for the entire night. No one opened it. No one approached it. The chain never moved. I checked the voice recorder. At the 2 hours and 47 minutes mark, corresponding to 1:47 a.m., there is a sound. Not my voice this time. Not speech. Footsteps. The sound of footsteps on packed earth. Not in my apartment. The acoustics are wrong, the resonance is wrong. It sounds like an outdoor recording. Like someone walking on a trail, captured from very close range. 2 sets of footsteps. One heavier, one lighter. Walking at a comfortable pace. Moving together. And underneath them, barely audible, right at the threshold of the recorder's sensitivity, a 3rd set. Smaller. Quicker. The cadence of a child keeping up with adults. The footsteps continue for 41 seconds and then stop. Then my voice, asleep, in my apartment, recorded by a device on my nightstand, says one word. Here. Then silence. Then my breathing, sleeping rhythm, until morning. I don't know what's happening to me. I don't know if I'm going somewhere in my sleep or if somewhere is coming to me. I don't know if the dirt on my feet means I walked a trail or if the trail is walking me. I don't know if the fern trail is a place that takes people or a place that people go, and I don't know anymore if that difference matters. I know that Caleb Brenn vanished on a Saturday afternoon in September. I know his father followed in December. I know that the footprints always face south. I know that something has been sending drawings that say we found him and placing toys on roots and calling phones that shouldn't ring. I know that Gerald Fife heard his name spoken from under the ground by a voice that was telling someone else he was there. I know that Martinez throws away small green dinosaurs that keep appearing in his life no matter how far he moves from Ohio. And I know that 4 nights ago I wrote in my own notebook, in my own handwriting, a calculation for how to get home. And the number was the distance to the park. I don't think this is a haunting. I don't think anything at Willow Fork is angry or hungry or malicious. I think the fern trail has a somewhere else inside it, between the footbridge and that hickory tree, and I think Caleb walked into it the way a child walks into the next room without thinking. And I think his father understood that his son wasn't dead but gone, Not taken but elsewhere, and he followed. Deliberately. Keys set down gently because you don't need keys where you're going. Because you're already home when you get there. And I think whatever that place is, it's been trying to show me. Not pull me. Show me. The laughter, the prints, the calls, the drawings, they're not lures. They're evidence of continued existence. There's someone waving from the other side of a window. But I think the window is my sleep. And I think my sleeping self has already agreed to something my waking self hasn't. And I think the distance between those two selves is shortening the same way the distance in my dreams is shortening, 15 feet last time, and closing, and when it reaches 0 I won't wake up in my kitchen with my boots on. I'll wake up on the trail. Or I won't wake up at all. Or there won't be a difference. It's 2:47 a.m. now. The same minute the footsteps started on the recording. I'm sitting at my table, and my feet are clean, and my door is locked, and my keys are in the freezer. Everything is in order. Everything is where it should be. But I can smell it. Right now, sitting here. Wet leaves and creek water and something mineral underneath. It's faint. It might be nothing. It might be my memory of the smell filling in what isn't there. Or the window is open and someone is waving and my sleeping self is about to wave back. I'm going to stop recording. I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to wake up in the morning and drive to work and stay in the south section and check fishing permits and answer questions about trail conditions I won't personally verify. That's tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll be fine. But I put the recorder on the nightstand and I pressed record and tomorrow morning I'll play it back and maybe there will be nothing, 8 hours of breathing and refrigerator hum, and maybe there won't be. And if there are footsteps again, if my voice says something in the dark to someone I can't see, I'll have to decide what to do with that information. Whether to keep locking the door against something that doesn't use the door. Whether to keep my boots in the trunk when the dirt finds my feet anyway. Whether to keep writing down my odometer when my hands have already done the math. 23 miles. I know the way. I've always known the way. I'm just not sure anymore which one of me is driving.